They pushed you to the edge, didn't they? They whispered behind your back. They questioned your silence. They mistook your calm for weakness. They thought if they provoked you long enough, if they doubted you loudly enough, if they disrespected you publicly enough, you would explode. They wanted a reaction. They wanted to see you lose control, because in their minds, control was never your strength. But they were wrong. You mastered restraint, and they never saw that coming. They expected noise. They expected you to argue, to defend yourself, to shout your truth into rooms that never deserved your voice. They thought you would fight for their approval. They assumed you would beg to be understood. They believed your silence meant surrender. But what they didn't understand, what they couldn't understand, is that your silence was not surrender. It was strategy. While they were throwing stones, you were building walls. While they were gossiping, you were growing. While they were trying to trigger you, you were studying them. They expected chaos, but you chose control. And control is power in its purest form. There were nights, though, when it burned. Let's not pretend it didn't. There were nights when your hands trembled with words unsaid, when your chest felt heavy with the weight of injustice, when your mind replayed their disrespect over and over like a broken record. You wanted to react. You wanted to show them that you could destroy them with the truth. You wanted to remind them who they were dealing with. But you didn't. You breathed. You stepped back. You swallowed the fire. Not because you were weak, but because you were wise. Because you realized something they never did. The loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest. The strongest person is the one who can feel the storm inside and still choose not to let it destroy everything around them. You stood in the middle of provocation like a mountain in a hurricane, unshaken, unmoved, watching, learning, becoming. They thought your restraint meant you were afraid to speak, afraid to confront, afraid to stand up. But what they didn't know is that you were confronting something far greater than them. You were confronting yourself, your impulses, your ego, your pride. Every time they tried to bait you, you had a choice: react and feed the fire, or remain still and starve it. And you chose the harder path. You chose discipline. You chose growth. You chose evolution, because you understood something that most people never do. Every reaction is a transfer of power. When you react blindly, you give them control over your emotions. You hand them the steering wheel of your mind. But when you pause, when you breathe, when you respond with intention instead of impulse, you take the power back. You mastered that pause, that sacred, powerful pause between stimulus and response. And in that pause, you became unstoppable. Did they really think you would stay broken? Did they really believe their words would define you? Did they assume your patience meant permanent submission? Look at them now, confused, frustrated, uneasy, because nothing unsettles insecure people more than someone who refuses to be provoked. They kept pushing, waiting for the explosion, but all they got was your composure. They kept testing, hoping for weakness, but all they found was your discipline. They wanted drama. You gave them distance. They wanted noise. You gave them silence. And your silence became louder than their insults. Your calm became heavier than their chaos. Your restraint became a mirror, forcing them to see their own immaturity reflected back at them. And that shook them. You see, restraint is not passive. It is active strength. It is the warrior lowering his sword because he knows he doesn't need to swing it. It is the lion walking away from barking dogs. It is the ocean remaining vast and deep while the surface waves crash and scream. They mistook your depth for emptiness. They mistook your stillness for weakness. But beneath that still surface you were transforming. Every insult became fuel. Every betrayal became clarity. Every disappointment became a lesson. You stopped wasting energy trying to correct people who were committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped chasing validation from those who benefited from your self-doubt. You stopped explaining yourself to ears that were never listening. Instead, you refined yourself, sharpened your focus, strengthened your discipline, and quietly, silently, you leveled up. And that's when the power shifted. They started noticing. You weren't reacting anymore. You weren't arguing. You weren't defending. You were building, improving, ascending. And suddenly, the same people who tried to provoke you started watching you closely, because your silence was no longer confusing, it was intimidating. They began to feel the distance, the emotional distance, the psychological distance. You weren't available for manipulation anymore. You weren't accessible through anger anymore. You weren't controllable through guilt anymore. And that terrified them, because control was the only language they spoke, and you had become fluent in detachment. Do you understand how powerful that is? Detachment, the ability to care but not cling, to observe but not absorb, to hear but not internalize. You realize that not every opinion deserves space in your mind. Not every criticism deserves residence in your heart. Not every battle deserves your sword. You stopped fighting for attention. You stopped fighting for approval. You stopped fighting people who were secretly fighting themselves. And instead, you fought for your peace, and you won. There is something magnetic about a person who has mastered restraint. You walk differently, slower, intentional, grounded. You speak differently, fewer words, greater weight. You respond differently, calm, calculated, unbothered, and people feel it. They feel the gravity of someone who cannot be easily shaken. They feel the quiet authority of someone who does not need to prove anything. They feel the presence of someone who has faced their own chaos and conquered it. That's you. Not loud, not reckless, not reactive, but powerful, immovable, unapologetically controlled. They thought winning meant getting under your skin. They thought power meant dominating your emotions. They thought strength meant overpowering you with noise. But you showed them something deeper. You showed them that real strength is restraint. Real power is emotional mastery. Real dominance is self-control. You didn't destroy them with words. You defeated them with composure. You didn't humiliate them publicly. You outgrew them privately. And nothing hurts fragile egos more than being outgrown. Let's be honest. There were moments when you felt alone in this. Moments when you wondered if staying silent made you invisible. Moments when you questioned whether restraint was worth it. But look at who you've become. You are not easily triggered. You are not easily manipulated. You are not easily distracted. Your mind is sharper. Your emotions are steadier. Your focus is clearer. You have built an inner fortress that cannot be invaded by petty words or shallow judgments. And that fortress, that discipline, that mastery, that is your crown. Restraint is not suppression. It is selection. You are not ignoring your emotions. You are choosing which ones deserve expression. You are not bottling your anger. You are channeling it into ambition. You are not denying your pain. You are transforming it into wisdom. That is alchemy, turning chaos into clarity, turning fire into fuel, turning betrayal into boundaries. You didn't just survive their attempts to provoke you. You transcended them. And now, when they try the same old tactics, you smile. Not because it doesn't affect you, but because you see it clearly. You see the pattern, you see the insecurity, you see the projection, and you refuse to participate. They throw bait. You refuse to bite. They create drama. You create distance. They seek reaction. You remain in control, and that control has become your signature. Understand this. Anyone can react. Anyone can yell. Anyone can lose control. But not everyone can master themselves. Not everyone can feel rage and choose peace. Not everyone can experience betrayal and choose growth. Not everyone can be disrespected and choose dignity. You did, again and again, until it became who you are. You mastered restraint, not for them, for you. Because you realize that every time you refuse to react impulsively, you strengthen your character. Every time you walk away from unnecessary conflict, you protect your energy. Every time you choose silence over argument, you elevate your standards, and elevation changes everything. You don't argue with people beneath your mindset. You don't chase people beneath your value. You don't entertain chaos beneath your peace. You rise above it. And when you rise, some people lose access to you. That's not arrogance, that's alignment. Look at the contrast now. They are still reacting, still gossiping, still chasing attention, still trapped in cycles of drama. And you are calm, focused, disciplined, building a life so solid that their opinions can't shake it, their noise cannot penetrate it, their negativity cannot stain it, because you have mastered something rare, something powerful, something transformative. You have mastered restraint. And here is the final truth. Restraint is not about holding back forever. It is about choosing the right moment. It is about knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to fight and when to walk away, when to respond and when to let karma answer for you. You are not passive. You are precise. You are not weak. You are controlled power, like a bow pulled back, waiting for the perfect aim. Like a storm gathering strength before it reshapes the horizon. You are not absent. You are preparing.